All right. LICA is hosting this meeting because that's one of our missions that we have as an organization. And I'm just going to read off the 4 statements from our bylaws that tell us that this is what we need to do. We need to provide leadership in the identification of community needs, inform residents of the community in matters that may affect life on Lummi Island, communicate with government agencies and endeavor to represent the interests and concerns of the community without bias. And finally, to cooperate with other organizations and persons on matters of mutual interest and concerns. As a 501c3 organization, LICA has an obligation to remain neutral and present information helpful to the community so that its citizens can make informed decisions. LICA cannot and does not endorse any political positions or candidates. When possible, LICA tries to invite participants representing as many sides of an issue as possible. Information presented tonight represents views of those presenting, not LICA. It is our hope that this meeting will help answer questions and concerns that Islanders have about the future of LIFAC, how decisions relating to ferry operations are made, basics of ferry financing, and how Islanders can become more involved in the decision-making process. But mostly we do want to also hear from you. This meeting has been a long time coming. We planned to have a meeting like this at our May LICA board meeting. It's taken a while to get here. It would be an understatement to say that it's been a long, convoluted journey getting from there to here, where we are at this evening with LIFAC put on hold for lack of a quorum, an ordinance passed by the council without a formal recommendation from LIFAC, a veto of the ordinance by the county executive, and now a special council meeting scheduled for September 5th, where the council will vote to either sustain or override the veto. The work group has asked LICA to set up this meeting now to bring the community together so that in the temporary absence of the functioning LIFAC, Islanders can learn about the issues and how we are as a community can make our concerns known to council, the county executive, and public works staff. Putting together a hybrid meeting takes a lot of effort by the volunteers running the meeting with limited equipment and less than state-of-the-art technology, as you can see here. Okay, at last check, we have over 50 folks signed up to participate via Zoom, as well as a full crowd here at the Grange. Our tech team of Leslie and Paul Dempsey, Alan Krum, and Dan Deshpande will do their best to help keep the Zoom folks connected. Dan will be working hard to capture comments and questions from audience members in the room and on Zoom and enter them onto a virtual whiteboard, which later will be saved as a document on the working groups page on the community website. This meeting is being recorded and will be uploaded to the community website by tomorrow morning. Invitations will be sent to all county council members, the county executive, and public works staff to view the recording before the special council meeting. The members of the work group presenting here tonight have put hundreds of combined hours into working to research what is being presented. It is my pleasure to introduce tonight's moderator for this meeting, Bob Anderson.
Here. Hey, it's great to be with you all tonight. Those of you who navigated through the elements tonight, it's really cool. I think we have almost a full house. And online, I think together, how many?
50 online.
50 online. So there are more than 100 people who decided tonight was an important topic to discuss and to learn about and to give input to. Are we doing okay here?
No, the slide.
Here. Where?
Oh.
You want him on screen?
Yeah,
All right, hold on.
and also. This
You want me
is-
to advance the slides?
Yeah, you're gonna have to advance.
Okay.
No, I think maybe I didn't reconnect it. There.
How about that? I can push a button. Are we ready to go, Leslie? Others? Okay, great. So I was introduced as the moderator. I'm here to help people who are really expert at these topics to share their understanding, their wisdom, and their ideas with all of you. Let me just say at the outset, we have doors open here because we want as healthy an environment as we can to have good circulation here. We're pretty tight in here, so looks like everybody came well prepared. I'm glad about that. We'll be taking questions and comments, not only from the room here, but online. And as in any hybrid meeting, there's technology involved, and we're going to do the best to make sure that everybody who wants to speak, who has a question, who has a comment, has an opportunity to do that. Now, a few words about the Lummi Island Work Group. This group of 14 islanders got together about 6 months ago. I was sort of sandbagged into a meeting that I didn't know what it was all about, and here I am with you all today. But they got together because at that time, there was the prospect of a major fare increase that Public Works was proposing. And that got everybody's attention. I'm sure many of you in this room. And if that increase had gone through, it could have disrupted community life here and the affordability of living on the island. So for background on the work group members, who I've become very, very appreciative of, their talents, their interest, their commitment, you can go to the Community Association website, and there's a little profile on each one of them. So if you wonder who's cooking this stuff up, it's a group of really capable people. And thanks to their hard work, the group found an opportunity when this prospective increase came forward. They found an opportunity that Public Works could reconsider the way funds have been allocated to the Ferry Fund. And instead of $1 million deficit, which was being announced, with the acceptance of Public Works of the documents that they had found, Diane, Harper, Janice, Holmes, it went from $1 million deficit to $1 million surplus in the fare box, and to a $2 million surplus in the Ferry Fund. Now, when that happened, we could breathe a sigh of relief, couldn't we? Now, that was back in the earlier part of the year. But many other issues continue. We still have the prospects of declining relationship between revenue and expenses. And so tonight we want to brief you on what those issues are. And most importantly, we want to get your ideas. We want to get your input. We want to get your suggestions. This is a community meeting. This is your meeting. We're going to facilitate the interaction with us so that your voice can be heard. And our intention in having this meeting is to collect the best wisdom, the best ideas from those of you attending and transmit that to county decision makers. It's our intent to share that information during this interim period where we don't have a Lummi Island Ferry Advisory Committee. Mary announced that. But we don't want to go silent as a community during that time. I'm going to say it now, and I'm sure it will be said later. The Lummi Island Work Group has no intention whatsoever to displace LIFAC as the primary and most important role in representing and cultivating community input and making recommendations to the council and to the executive. It is in abeyance right now. We hope it will be reconstituted sooner than later, and you're going to be hearing more about that. But until that time, we wanted you to have a voice. So I've got a question for you to get things started. Since we want this to be your meeting, we're going to start with a question for you, and you'll have a minute to think about this. In a few words, what question or concern do you have about the ferry system that you would hope would be addressed tonight? So I want to give you a few moments to think about that, those of you online as well as here in the room. And for context, I want those online to use the chat feature. And if you're not familiar with the chat feature, you can press the tab Alt-H, and that should bring up chat on your home computer. So you can begin at any time putting information in the chat. So for context about your questions, we're here for two reasons tonight. We want to educate and inform ourselves about the ferry ordinance and ferry finances and what's coming up in the future. But more importantly, we want to listen to and gather Islanders' concerns and ideas about the system and future actions to help assure that we have a stable and affordable system. So let's come back to my question. In a few words, what question or concern do you have about the ferry system that you would hope would be addressed tonight? Now, I'd ask you to please limit it to one sentence or even a word or two. And what we're going to do is we're going to scribe your comments on what we call an electronic whiteboard. Dan is sitting right here. You're going to raise your question. He's going to get it down. And we're going to have all of those questions to inform our panel. We may not have anticipated something you're interested in. We'll try to bake it into what they're talking about. We'll put that list of questions up on the board. We'll look at them, and then we're going to get going on presentations. And we'll come back to that whiteboard at the end of the meeting. And we'll ask the question, did we hit all of these points? If we didn't, we'll try to do it then. And if we can't, we'll let you know, and we'll get back to you about it. So back to the question. Third chance here. In a very few words, what question or concern do you have about the ferry system that you would hope to be addressed tonight? Those of you in the room, please just raise your hand and I'll make sure that Dan gets it down. Yes, Sandy.
Well, to me, I think the most important thing going forward is the definition of operating expense versus capital investment.
Okay, I'll repeat the question. The question is, the most important thing is to understand the difference between operating expenses and capital. Did I catch that okay?
And how the definition.
The definition, right. Okay, great question. I'm sure we're going to get after it. Yes, sir.
I'd like to know what restrictions does the council have to consider in making that decision? Do they just decide everything is one way or the other, or do they follow accounting rules or audits? What?
Great question. I'll try to reframe it. You'd like to know what restrictions or limits does the county have in making a decision about that definition? Are they stuck with certain accounting principles or whatever it might be? Does that catch it?
Yes.
Okay, great. Let's hear some more questions. We really like to hear it. Yes, sir, Patrick.
I'm saying this in sadness rather than in anger.
Okay.
But what confidence can we have in the Department of Public Works and indeed of the majority of council members, given what we put through over the last year, that needs to be answered from them?
So I'll reframe it. Patrick is concerned, maybe skeptical, in terms of what confidence we, he says, could have, given our experience over the last few months, related to council and public works actions. Is that right? Okay, we got it. Next, yes, Julie.
I have concern, it's similar. I have concern and would like to know what it is that apparently keeps us, the people of Lonely Island, from being able to communicate with LIFAC and actually sit down and talk to understand what Public Works is doing and have them understand what we are thinking. What gets in the way of communication?
Okay, the issue is communication. What is getting in the way of the community and Public Works and the council having direct communication and discussions about issues of concern? Okay, thank you for that question. Let's have some more hands. I bet you've got some things on your mind. Yes, Raymond.
How do we repopulate LIFAC with the expertise we need to be an effective voice with county council during a very trying time coming forward with the transition to the new Ferry?
So Raymond is referencing that we have 4 vacancies on LIFAC now. How do we repopulate it? How does the county repopulate LIFAC with people having the qualifications that are needed? And I'm going to assume the commitment and other skill sets that will get us through in a productive way the big issues that are confronting us. Is that right? Okay. Yes, Mike.
Two. One is we have a $52 million grant sitting on the table, and those things have expiration dates for new Ferry. And so whatever we do, whatever we decide as a community, we want to keep that prize in mind, that we don't time that out. The other thing is, part of that 52 million for the new ferry is going to be a $16 million contribution from Washington County. And whatever we do, again, as a community, I don't want to poison that well, but they don't want to be our partners.
So the overall question and concern is, we have the prospects of a new ferry. There's money that's been committed to it, but there's more money that's going to have to be raised. How do we get through this period of time with a positive relationship with the county so that they feel willing and able to help support the completion of this project in a timely way? Okay, well, I got it. I think I got it. Other questions? I'm going to hold for just a minute. I want to make sure anybody who has an initial question is heard. Let's check online and see how the traffic is there. Are we getting chats in?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, Dan, would you please read them, and I'm going to come back to you, sir.
I can read them if you want. Wanda is asking about affordability. Michelle says, I'm concerned
Let me,
about.
Bill, I want you to, Alan, I'm going to repeat each one.
Okay, accountability, affordability.
Wanda is asking about affordability of the system.
Right.
Next.
Okay, Michelle, I'm concerned about the proposed 6-month break in ferry service while the ferry is being replaced. Is there a plan in place that is more reasonable?
The concern in this person's mind, Michelle, is about the potential break in service of 6 months when the new ferry system is being installed. Okay.
Okay, this is from Sharon Granger. An island community cannot be isolated with no ferry service for 4 to 5 months in the middle of winter.
Okay, we've got a similar concern from Karen Granger. Okay, next.
Paul Dempsey, if you're online, please.
Okay, no, don't harass the technologist.
Yeah, all right. Okay, Beth, she has evidently 2. How to have more transparent communication with county, not productive to be blindsided so often, works against building trust.
Okay, similar issue we heard earlier. How do we get to have transparent communications with the county? Blindsidedness is not a good thing.
Our second question is identify solutions for the most cost-effective capital and operational strategies and policies for operating the ferry.
Okay, we're looking to have the most cost-effective strategies and policies for operating the ferry, for capital and for operating the ferry.
Dan Jones, what are the top issues and recommendations for the next version of ferry ordinance?
Jan Jones is asking, what are the top, what would you say?
Issues
Top issues
and recommendations.
and recommendations for the next version of the ordinance. Okay, we got it.
Okay. Doreen Richmond, capital expenses versus operating expenses, and how is that being allocated?
Okay, the issue is capital versus operating, and how is that being allocated? A very fundamental issue. Peter Earle is going to be addressing that.
I think she's asking about its definition. Kerry Gard, does the Lummi Nation have any say in any of this?
Question, does the Lummi Nation have any say in any of this? We'll address that.
This David Kirshner, what is the status of the new ferry ordinance that was approved by the county council in July and has been vetoed by the county executive?
David Kirshner is asking what's the status of the ordinance that was passed in July and was vetoed by the county executive. We will address that for sure. Is that it? Okay, that's it.
For right now.
Now you're good there? Okay, we've got a hand in the back. Yes, Dean?
One of my concerns is I want to know what we can do as islanders to get our information across and our ideas across to the town, especially as we're coming up on the next meeting, where they're going to be deciding whether they support the veto or against. So what now is our
Great. Thank you for that question. The question is, what now can we do between now and September 5th, big day in the county? What can we as islanders do to impact, influence, affect that decision? Very important decision. You're going to be hearing more about that. Yes. Any other questions? Yes, Steve.
I'd like to understand the relationship of the $2 million, whatever it is, excess fund, the operating costs, and how that could be used to buffer the increase that we know we're going to have to take, but maybe spread it out. I'd like to understand that.
Okay.
Relationship.
Great question. Steve is asking, what about the surplus? How could that be used to buffer increases that are forthcoming? And we will talk about that. We have a special segment. Janice and Diane will talk about that. Okay. I'm going to close it off. Oh, yes, Jim.
Start to explore a different method of operating the Washington County Ferry, such as an all-county ferry district, putting with the WTA, something else, to where we don't have these roller coasters.
Okay, Jim.
And, I've been watching.
So the comment was, could we explore some other method of operating the ferry, some kind of association with WTA that would help to avoid the roller coaster experience that we've been having in our relationship with Public Works. Did I get that all right, Jim?
Or an all-county ferry district like Ferry County.
Perhaps an all-county ferry district. Okay, we're gonna. Yes, we have one more on the.
Could you repeat how to get into the chat? We had a few new people.
Okay, how to get into the chat? You can press Alt H on your computer, and that should open up the chat feature on your computer. Okay, thank you. I want to keep us moving here. Let's pull up the whiteboard, please. Okay, quickly, we're going to just scan through these. We had question about accountability, somebody concerned about the break in service when the new ferry is getting replaced, and the isolation that occurs in a period like that. The definition of operating versus capital, big question. What restrictions does the council have when they're considering making their decisions? Why do islanders, what confidence can we have in the Department of Public Works and council members given our recent history? Why do islanders and tourists pay the same amount for a round trip? What is it that keeps us, Lummi Island, prevents us from communicating with the county and LIFAC, and maybe that's Public Works? Number 8, how do we repopulate LIFAC with experts with qualifications that are needed to move toward productivity? Number 9, the $52 million grant has an expiration. How do we make sure we hold on to that and make sure the county still feels good about funding their part of it? Capital expenses again versus operating. How's that being allocated? Somebody asked, what are the top issues and recommendations for the next version of the ferry ordinance? And finally, how to have more transparent communication with county, not productive, to be blindsided so often, works against building trust. Here we go with the next page. Capital versus operating. Does the Lummi Nation have a say in any of this? 15, what can we do as islanders to get our ideas and information across to the county as they make their decisions on the veto? 16, what is the relationship between the $2 million surplus and the expenses that are coming up? 17, could we explore broader ideas to operate the ferry like the WTA or an all-county ferry district? And finally, what is the status of the new ferry ordinance that was approved by the county council in July and has been vetoed by the county executive? These are all excellent questions. It suggests to me that you're paying attention. We're going to get to all of these throughout the presentation, or if we don't, we'll come back to them at a later time. So with that, we're going to start off with, let me close this out. And there we go. How about that? Actually got it there. Any trouble advancing this slide, gentlemen? There we go. Okay.
There.
Somebody was helping me. Okay, so here's our agenda. You've just sort of built it for us. We're going to talk about the roles of the players in the decision-making process. Pam Gould is going to be up here in a minute. We're going to talk about the status of LIFAC and the need to restore it. Charles Bailey, former LIFAC guy. Ferry finances, 2 experts, Diane Harper, Janice Holmes. Then we're going to have an update on the ferry ordinance and the major issues. Peter Earle is going to cover that, and then we're going to come back and see what questions remain. With that, I want to turn it over to Pam Gould, who will now talk about the ferry decision process.
Do I have to advance these slides or do it?
It's working.
It is working, so you'll do it. Hi, my name is Pam Gould and I'm a resident of Lummi Island. And we're just going to talk a little more about the ferry decision-making process. First, I think it's helpful to know this picture is one of the very early ferries. Whatcom County has owned the Hale Passage route from Gooseberry Point to Lummi Island since 1924. Nearly 100 years the county's been managing the Whatcom County Ferry. And we have really been very lucky to have such solid leadership for our highly reliable Whatcom County ferry system. We have experienced nearly none of the disrupted and canceled schedules and crash events that the Washington State ferry system has encountered in recent years. So I think that's really been very helpful. So let's talk about how decisions get made. First, the Whatcom Chief is owned by the Whatcom County Equipment Rental and Revolving Fund, ER&R, which is part of, it's the ER&R, that's what they call it. It's part of the county road network. And the ER&R owns all of the large equipment for Whatcom County. They own the snow plows, the police cars, the road stripping machine, and the Whatcom Chief, which is the largest piece of equipment that the ER&R is responsible for. The county pays for the ferry through unincorporated area property taxes, grants, and fares. And interestingly, county members within the city limits of like Linden, Bellingham, Ferndale, pay no taxes towards the Whatcom County ferry system. Even though the Whatcom Chief is part of the Whatcom County road network, it is a very complicated road, much more complicated than any other road or bridge. Employees, fares, docks, movable parts, the Coast Guard rules, dry dock maintenance. No other roads or bridges are this complex. The Whatcom County Public Works Department operates the ferry system, and this is a pie chart of their very large budget. There are 26 slices to this pie. The 3 largest slices account for the traditional half of the budget, equipment, stores, maintenance, and operations. But the 2 other largest portions are very non-traditional responsibilities for Whatcom County.
the maintenance of the Nooksack flood control structures, and the operation of the ferry services to and from Lummi Island. The ferry is a very small portion of the Whatcom County Public Works responsibilities and only is a 6% section of its total budget. And the total public works budget is only 15% of the Whatcom County budget. The Whatcom County budget is massive, and the county council has a massive ship to manage. Unlike other county roads, here the users pay for their services and the service levels are changeable. Most roads are available 24/7. We have a very good service level, but our roads are unavailable for part of the day. So now let's take a look at how the county council decisions about the ferry are advised by the county public works and the Lummi Island Ferry Advisory Committee. So I'm going to use the cursor here. Let's start with the county voters. The county voters elect the county executive and the Whatcom County Council. The county executive hires and directs the staff, and for example, Satpal Sidhu, our current executive, recently hired Liz Kosa as the new director of public works. She comes to that role with a rich background in the state ferry system, and we hope that that will be helpful to us moving forward. The Public Works Department talks back and forth between the county executive and takes direction from him. Conversely here, the Whatcom County Council makes code changes and adopts a budget for the massive Whatcom County budget. And that job is so big that they assist themselves by using various public committees. The Council of Public Works Committee is one of the committees that they will often refer questions to, code changes or budget questions. They'll have the county look at it and get back to them with a recommendation. That helps them move forward on all the business that they have to accomplish. Conversely, they also have the Lummi Island Ferry Advisory Committee. The council set up 46 different advisory committees from the county on various issues, and the Lummi Island Ferry Advisory Committee is one of those committees to help them make decisions when they have difficult and complex issues that they can't devote enough time to. They kick them down to one of their committees or one of their advisory committees to get back to them about what their recommendations are. So to use an example currently that we're dealing with, the Public Works Department suggested some code changes, and they came forward to the county council. The county council looked at them and said, well, I think we need help with this decision, and they requested information from the Public Works Committee and from the Lummi Island Ferry Advisory Committee. But for various reasons, neither the Ferry Advisory Committee nor the Public Works Committee were able to get back to Whatcom County with the recommendations or questions answered that they asked. But nevertheless, the council decided to vote on the code changes and pass them and sent that vote back to the county executive. He was not happy with this decision, and consequently, he vetoed that event. Now that kicks it back to the Whatcom County Council, and Peter is going to talk more about how they are going to deal with that issue coming forward. At this point, does anyone have any questions on anything I've covered so far? Yes.
Various advisory committees subject to open meeting laws.
Yes, they are. Yes.
Pam, repeat the question.
Oh, I'm sorry. The question was, like it says right here, the question was, I know. The question was, are the advisory committees subject to the public meeting laws? And the answer was, yes, they are. Yes.
Is it fair then, from what you laid out, to conclude that the council was operating in the dark when they made their decision?
It is, so the question is, was it fair to conclude that the council was operating in the dark when they made their decision? I think it would be difficult to extrapolate why they decided to make their decision at that time. But for whatever reason, the county executive was not comfortable with that decision, and that was why he vetoed it. Yes.
So the subcommittee, the Public Works Advisory and Long Island Ferry Advisory, are they separate committees or do they meet together in any capacity?
So the question is, are the County Public Works Committee and the Lummi Island Ferry Advisory Committee separate, or do they meet together in any capacity? And the answer is they are separate. The Whatcom County Public Works Committee meets.
They don't communicate.
They do not communicate. Each of them communicates separately with the council. That's their main communication point.
Pam, I think you want to clarify that LIFAC does sometimes meet with the Public Works. They ask for their.
Oh, that's true. You're right. Occasionally, they don't have formal meetings with them, but sometimes the Public Works Committee does request a member of the LIFAC committee to meet with them to clarify an issue in the same way that the council will request a decision by LIFAC about what they support or don't support or what their feelings are. Yes.
What's another clarification?
Yes.
The council also has plans on the designated and
Right. We have a one of our county council. Peter wanted to make the point that the county council does have a designated county council representative, for each of the advisory councils, and the Lummi Island Ferry Advisory Council has Ben Ellenboss as our advisory member from the council. Todd Donovan. Oh, I'm sorry. You're right. Todd Donovan is the LIFAC person.
Yes.
Yes.
Liaison to LIFAC.
Got you. You're right. Todd Donovan is our liaison to LIFAC. Exactly. And Ben Ellenboss is our county council representative for our section of the county.
Also the secondary contact.
And he's the secondary contact for LIFAC. Okay, so it's Todd Donovan 1, Ben Ellenboss 2. Yes.
So, Pam, does the council set criteria to LIFAC of what they need from us, what they're looking for, like the criteria, the questions that they want from the community to make this happen, or do they just say, work it out?
Pam, let's
I think
defer this.
it's time to bring in the next section.
Okay. That is a really good question, Jesse. Should I repeat it? This will be the last question. So the question was, does the county council say exactly what it is they want from LIFAC, or do they just exactly what the questions are they want answered, or do they just kind of say, work it out? In my experience.
Okay, we're going to answer that question. Charles.
Perfect. Yeah, that's exactly right. Charles is going to talk about LIFAC and he'll be able to answer that much better than I will. So next I'd like to introduce Charles Bailey, a former LIFAC member for 6 years. And he's going to talk about the reconstitution.
Well, thank you, Pam, and what a wonderful segue into what I want to say, and good evening, everyone. I first want to greet my fellow alumni of LIFAC, Raymond Blake, who's sitting there, and Mike Skean, who's sitting right there, and a current member, Rich Fry. We all, sorry? Oh, sorry. And I'm sure there are many others. I figure there are about 20 of us over the last 10 years that have served for various periods of time on LIFAC. But I want to start by picking up on something Pam said about 100 years of ferry service to Gooseberry Point. I'm really struck by that. And this evening, I'm going to talk to you, of course, about LIFAC, and I'm hoping that we can get it ready for the next 100 years of service to Gooseberry Point. And I'm going to remind you what LIFAC is and why it's important and how it works. And as you know, the county has paused LIFAC at this point, but I hope that what I have to say will motivate some of you or some of our other neighbors to step up and volunteer to eventually become an alumnus of LIFAC, but in the meantime, do a lot of good work. In doing so, you will be enlarging our community. And if you serve, you do this and you serve the full 6 years, there is an extra prize. Rich Hudson tells me that you will be on the short list to be the co-pilot of the first all-electric ferry to sail across Hale Pass. So sign up now. But there's more, and that is that I want to engage all of you in talking about the future of LIFAC and what we need to do to make it more productive than even it's been in the past. So so this is basically what are we talking about here? LIFAC is one of many boards, commissions, and committees of the county. You've heard about the Planning Commission, which deals with zoning changes, the Climate Impact Advisory Committee, which advises on climate change adaptation, mitigation, and several other commissions have been mentioned here. But what all these boards and commissions have in common is this: they provide organized and current input from citizens to county government within their subject areas. And let me really make this distinction between these boards, commissions, and committees, which are citizens volunteering their time for free to help in these various areas, and council committees. Council committees are council members working in subgroups. They are elected officials, they're not selected, and they pass legislation onto the committee of the whole or the full body of the county council. So there's a public works committee that Pam referred to, which is 3 members of council who meet and vote and decide on issues relating to public works. And then there is LIFAC, which is members who were appointed from people who volunteer and apply and to serve. So in our case, it's the county council who does the appointing, and they have the expectation that the members will give them good advice on ferry operations and the views of ferry users. So LIFAC was set up to have 7 members. Up to 3 of them are to be from off the island, neither residents here nor property owners here. LIFAC meets monthly, and each member over time ideally builds up a body of knowledge and relationships valuable for LIFAC's core task. And in my view, that core task is the second bullet here. LIFAC researches, reviews, and makes recommendations to the council and the executive on all aspects of ferry operations, and new ferry planning and finances. In a nutshell, it's the 3 R's again: research, review, and recommend. That's what LIFAC is supposed to do. So now let's turn to why LIFAC is important. It's important for what it has already achieved and the promise that achievement holds for the future. So if you switch to the next slide, please. No. Back. There's somehow.
Did they get reversed? I'm sorry. Let's try one more.
Okay, here we go. So what are some of the, as you'll hear from Diane, Harper, and Janice, Holmes in a moment, the county established a new system of ferry finances in 2006, the Ferry System Fund. And that fund has been remarkably successful, robust and successful over the last 17 years in keeping the ferry solvent and fare increases infrequent. LIFAC has a similar record of success. It was established by the county in 2012. It both monitored ferry operations, and it recognized the need for new ferry, which it recommended in 2016, now 7 years ago. The timeline here shows a series of milestones in friendly but arm's length collaboration between LIFAC and the ferry owners, the Public Works Department, or the ER&R, in the design and funding of the new electric ferry. It's not only these milestones, but the processes that produce them that make LIFAC's first decade so successful. So let's dive in and look a bit more at these processes. LIFAC's rules and procedures fall into three groups. First, those that enable LIFAC to do the 3 R's I mentioned: research, review, and recommendation. These are the third and fourth and the last bullet. Operate as independently of county staffing as possible. Request information from the executive as needed, and appoint ad hoc committees to work on specific issues. The second group, which is equally important, because they guide how LIFAC gathers information from ferry users and the public. And this is particularly important because of the events of the last 9 months. These are bullets 5 and 6. Schedule open sessions every meeting and conduct the meetings in accordance with the Washington State Open Public Meetings Act. There is area here for further improvement. The remaining 2 bullets, the top 2, just give LIFAC a lot of flexibility in organizing itself. Now let me return to my pitch. We have a moment of opportunity here for new people from our community to join LIFAC. They paused it the council has paused it while they consider possible changes to the procedures I've just outlined and the number of members. However, it's really important to reconstitute LIFAC as quickly as possible. You can help by volunteering to become a member and applying for one of the 4 vacancies. Everyone, all of us, can help by contributing your ideas on how to make LIFAC even more effective than it's been in the past. So my last slide is some questions for us to consider. What thoughts do you have that would be useful to ensuring a good future for LIFAC? That's the real payoff to my talk, and I'll stop here in a moment. But I'll just go through some of these questions. What are the most important qualifications for LIFAC members? That question has already come up. Should new members receive an orientation? That is a suggestion that has come to us from the Barry Buchanan, the chair of the county council. And what should that be? Should LIFAC be enlarged? And if so, how many, why, and how? How should LIFAC relate to the Public Works Department? Should the county have a job description for members against which member performance could be judged periodically by council? What procedural changes would enable LIFAC to hold more productive two-way discussions with ferry users at its meeting? So those are the questions that I had. So now I'd like to pause here and ask for more questions and comments from all of you. Thank you. Ralph.
Comment on the possibility of using external resources or subcommittees, non-LIFAC members possibly. That's something that LIFAC could be doing.
Yes, these yeah. The question is, what is the scope for LIFAC using non-members' expertise through a subcommittee process? And the answer is all of the processes I just enumerated on the slide are already provided for in Whatcom County Code Chapter 2.145, which created LIFAC. And there is such a provision for an ad hoc committee, a subcommittee to LIFAC, in which the only proviso is that 2 of its members must be serving current members of LIFAC. So this is a procedure which is there. It's been used a few times, but not very much. But one could imagine it would be a way for people with particular expertise because of their own professional backgrounds, like the people that will be speaking later, or people that just have a particular concern, like they want to see a change in the ferry schedule, the timings of sailings and so forth. But that hasn't been tried really. Diane.
I would like to see a process where public works department staff needed to allow at least a couple of months for LIFAC to review items before the public works department takes it to the county council.
That's a question.
No.
Let me give the answer to
What thoughts do you have for enhancing LIFAC? That's my thought.
Okay, good. This is a very good thought, which I will repeat. There should be a lag time of up to 2 months to give time for at least 2 LIFAC meetings at which Public Works would present for comment any proposals that it is going to forward to council. Good idea. Yes.
Once again, I'm concerned about the communication process. The 2 council meetings, or the 1 council meeting I've been to, and also the LIFAC meetings, and they go by the rules of public meetings. And this 3-minute presentation that actually is timed, and then you sit down. There's no feedback, there's no communicating. How can we change that? Because it seems like that's where we hit the wall. You know, when we present our feelings, so to speak, but we get back nothing.
The question is, how can we reduce the barrier between what the public wants to say to LIFAC and LIFAC's capability to respond in a meaningful, immediate way? And I will come back, I'll comment on that, but let's take one more question.
I'd say it's even more than that, because it's after the 18 months I was going to the LIFAC meeting, there was not any thought of going and investigating what and getting community involvement or input into what was going on. And unfortunately, in fact, when I would bring that up, I would get lectures on how important it is not to upset public works because they'll stop the vote. And twice. And
right. So this is a comment, and
but I do think that having a subcommittee for the rules,
right,
that would actively involve the community, actively run surveys, actively run feedback mechanisms that are, you know, constantly going, especially when you think in terms of not just the current statutes, but more so the planning for the new ferry and the outage.
right.
It's going to be a big community project.
Right.
To get around.
Can you restate that, just summarize it?
Yes. Yes. The comment is about the lack of a easy 2-way channel of communications between LIFAC members in their meetings and the public who come with issues in which they either have deep expertise or deep concern. And that there seems to be an imbalance between LIFAC's regard for public works and LIFAC's regard for the public.
I have a comment on.
Sure. So online comment from Jan Jones.
Why don't you unmute?
Oh,
With LIFAC's mission to represent Lummi Island, why are non-islanders needed or appropriate? What are the expectations of non-island members? They must be specific. There are plenty of non-island perspectives holding forth on the council.
okay. I don't have to repeat that.
That came across online.
Okay. Okay, fine. Pat,
I'm just not clear on how, what is the procedure for addressing the issues? Yeah, as we restructure like that, how do we go about doing that? Do we set up LIFAC and then make meetings within it, or do we do it by community effort, or how do you envision coming to a new LIFAC?
how do we change LIFAC in the direction that we think it ought to be in future is the question.
Comment on what?
You want?
Pathway? Yes, you should answer that question.
Okay. The answer is that it needs to be, it needs the council to change the code that defines what LIFAC's processes and procedures are. So everything that we say here and that you contribute later in the next few days, hopefully, that we can put into a petition or a policy brief for the council as to what the sense of our community says should be the changes would be the usual route to do this.
Take one more question and we need to go to the next slide.
Yeah, I want to come back to a couple of comments, but let me take one. Rich. Sure.
Just a brief comment on this. Ordinance establishing LIFAC defines what LIFAC is supposed to do in very detailed terms. And many of the questions that have been mentioned about what LIFAC is supposed to do are in that ordinance. Public Works is not mentioned in that ordinance.
That's right.
Even once.
That's right.
So the issue about what the duties of LIFAC are, I think arguably include all of these things that Ron discussed. And the question is, why haven't they been?
Why haven't they?
So the question on the floor about the relationship with Public Works and not doing the other things. I think
Right. The question about the relationship between LIFAC and Public Works is one that is not taken up in the county code that establishes LIFAC. And so it is still an open question, which we all have a right to have a view on and to make suggestions about.
How many, so the suggestions that LIFAC makes to the county, how many have they taken?
Okay, I can go back to, I'm sorry, I'm sort of,
We have 2 minutes.
I've got 2 minutes. Let me just try to answer a couple of these. Yeah. The question was, how many of LIFAC's recommendations have been taken up by county and acted on by county council? And the milestones here will answer the last question. Thank you. Let me get back to this question, 2 questions that I would like to comment on in the 2 minutes I have left. One is this issue of relationship with Public Works. My view of this has always been, they're the owners, they control the data, they have the financial data, the operational data, they hire the staff, they run the ferry. They work for the county executive, a separate branch of county government, right? And from the county council. LIFAC advises the county council. County council controls budget and code. County council does not tell the county executive details of how to do its work. You would never have the county executive weighing in on many of these issues. Let me finish, please. So the question of how to have this balance where you need them, they're good people trying to do their jobs, but they can do their jobs better if they listen to what the community has to offer. And so my view is trust but verify. That's what we should be doing on LIFAC. On the communications thing, this whole business of 3 minutes and you're out as a way of communicating to in our democratic government may work well for the county council, where they have zillions of people who come usually with individual things, but often with important public policy statements. And they sit there and they, by their own regulations, they do not respond. They listen, but they don't question, they don't clarify, they take it in. I think that that model has been sort of foisted on these committees who are not elected. LIFAC members are not elected officials. There should not be this kind of impervious Teflon barrier between people from our community who are selected, who volunteer and selected and do all of this work, build up this expertise. There should be a two-way flow. Yes.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, you can now. I'm finished.
Rules of orders should not be used as a weapon. 3-minute limitations should not be used as a weapon. We want light in like that. We want openness. Thank you.
I think that's the best way for me to end. Okay, Rema.
Well, and I want to say in my 6 years on LIFAC, and when I was chair in particular, and we used that 3-minute way of getting through issues on a timely basis, but at the end, we also had a comment period. So it is up to the chair, make sure good people are selected for LIFAC, because there are ways to work within that structure, I think.
Let me just close. Thank you, Rema, for making that point. Go back to this slide when you have a chance to look at it. All of this information is from the county code. I didn't make this up. This is all in the county code. You can find it on the website. And let me underscore that these processes, the most important ones are LIFAC sets its own procedures and schedules and timing. A lot of flexibility, as Rema has just mentioned, to do the work, as she did so ably when she was chairing LIFAC. So there are a whole number of ways of breaking down this barrier. There's nothing, I could find nothing in the code that said that because I'm a mere citizen that turns up, that I have to speak for only 3 minutes, that the chair can't let me speak longer, or there can't be discussion. Oh, and so forth. Anyway, sorry, I'm going to stop here. Thank you very much. Let me you. Okay.
Thank you, Charlie. So you are the reason that we are running overtime, and that's a good reason. So I'm going to beg your forgiveness. This meeting is probably going to go till 9 o'clock. I hope you can stay. We had planned to stop at 8:30, but darn it, you've got some good things to talk about. So I want to introduce our next speaker. Diane Harper is going to talk with us, followed by Janice on ferry finances. This is really basic, important stuff for you to learn.
Those of you that were around in 2011 probably know all this stuff that I'm going to run through very quickly, but I think it's good for all of us ferry users to have some sense of the overall financial underpinnings of the ferry system. And then Janice is going to talk more specifically about where we are today. The details on where we are today can be found at the LICA website under the work group heading. There is a 10-page paper that goes into a lot of detail. I'm going to do an overview of how the ferry operates financially. Who sets the fares? The county council. How do they decide what the fares are? It's in the county code, the code that all of this debate is about changing. And the way that the code tells us the fare should be set is it's the total actual operating costs of the ferry. And after figuring out those total costs, certain kinds of costs are subtracted. And then that adjusted cost, we pay 55% of it. So what are the total operating costs? Well, you can see in this pie chart that and the blue on the right hand and bottom, that is all ferry wages, ferry operation wages, vessel
and then vessel maintenance and upkeep, fuel, dry dock. So about 75% of all of the total operating expenses goes to keep the boat running back and forth. Then in addition to that, we've got 11% that goes to ferry administration, but you have to keep in mind that every county department has to pay into a fund that supports the county council, the county purchasing agent, the county computer technicians. And so every department does that. We have a big slice, 10% going to the Gooseberry Dock. Why is that so big? It's because of the lease with the Lummi Nation for our access over that dock. And then, as we've been talking about for several months now, there's a smaller slice that goes to the Lummi Island dock. And then there are these things called parking and staging. We used to, on the Gooseberry side, hire security for parking. But that expense in 2011, when the Ferry Task Force consulted with the community said, no, we really don't want to pay for that anymore. And in my opinion, that's the kind of thing LIFAC should be doing, is asking the community which expenses are worthwhile and which not. So total operational expenses. The next thing is, well, who pays for those? Well, I've just said we pay 55% after certain other things are subtracted according to the Whatcom County Code. And what are those revenues? They're from the state. The state contributes 2 streams of revenue to the ferry. And the big $2 million jump from being $1 million in deficit to $1 million surplus came about because the county had not been counting one of those revenue streams. And the work group persuaded them that they should have been, and the accountants and the lawyers agreed. And that amounted to a huge help for us as far as future fares. So about 15% of the total operating costs come from other sources. We pay 55% of the remainder, and Public Works pays the rest. And Public Works, again, as Pam said, gets that from the unincorporated area property tax for the road fund, or possibly from grants on some occasions. I'm going to quit with this slide and have Janice come up and talk about the current situation. But the thing I want you to notice is that the bottom line indicates fares from 2006 projected to 2026 if there is no fare increase. And you'll see the dip in that lower green line. That was the 2020 COVID experience. The black line is what the total operating expenses are without the issues that Peter is going to address. If we had those issues dealt with, then it would be the black line. Without those issues being dealt with, then the fares are going to be responsible for that red line. And now I'd like to have Janice come up and talk about where we are today. And then we'll both answer questions. Maybe. If we can.
No. You have the clicker?
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. So the Ferry System Fund was established over 2 years from 06 and 07. And prior to that, the 55% had merely been a goal that the county had hoped to recoup in fares. And what the fares paid for at that time was also different. And so this was all formalized in 06 and 07. And so in this chart, you can see in that since that time, the green bar represents the fare revenue, and the black bar is the 55% fare goal. And so you can see that in many years, the revenue exceeded the goal during that time. And then the shaded portion is the cumulative surplus. And so since this was established through 2022, fares successfully paid the targeted goal and created a surplus. And not only did it create a surplus, it was a sufficient surplus to cover the shortfall that was very dramatically shown in Diane's chart, the dip, when fares were not collected in 2020 due to the pandemic. And so at the end of 2022, there was over $1 million surplus in fare box revenue. And the revenue streams is outlined. If you look at the cumulative total, it gives you a better idea of how this has worked than just on a year-by-year basis. And so, as Diane mentioned, the total operation cost is reduced by other revenue sources. The motor vehicle fuel tax, that there are two sources of that come. One comes because we have a ferry, and that funding is dedicated to the ferry. The second stream comes because the ferry is a road, and that funding is now established as coming to the ferry as well. Then there's some miscellaneous interest income and employee trip credits. So cumulatively, the total revenue in Table 6, the chart to the right, yes, the chart to the right, the table to the right, shows that total revenue for those years exceeded total operating costs, leaving a balance of $544,000. When this system was created, the road fund made an initial deposit into the ferry system fund of a little over 1.5 million. And I've looked through the legislative history, there's no real rationale ever provided as to why this money was deposited in the ferry system fund, but it appears to have functioned as a reserve. And the Public Works has stated that it would be good management to keep 3 to 6 months operating reserve in the fund for unanticipated expenses. So when you look at these totals, then the calculated balance between all the revenue and all the operating costs should be $2.131 million. However, the reported balance is only $2.099 million. It's unclear where this $31,000 discrepancy is. Public Works has reported that it has to do with an unrealized gain on investments. There are other issues that could have contributed to it. But so the balance is 2.099. So when you look at this, the cumulative fare box contribution out of that is $1,012,000, and the available surplus road fund contribution is $1,087,000. Now, the surplus fare box is intended to go to those years when there is a deficit fare box. So that's a healthy balance right now in the ferry system fund. And the 1 million in road funds that is left over from the initial contribution is enough for 3 to 6 months operating reserve should there be unanticipated expenses. And so what it comes down to is the ferry system fund right now is solvent. It has healthy reserves. It can cover deficits, and it can cover unanticipated expenses. And then the issues that are yet to be addressed, there are a lot of outstanding financial issues that still need to be addressed. And this chart can show you, one is whether or not the council will vote to apply ARPA funds for those missing fare box revenue in 2020 due to the pandemic, which would be $358,000, which would increase our surplus for any future deficits. And whether dolphin costs should be subtracted as not properly charged as regular and routine maintenance. And if both those things happen, there would be sufficient surplus fare revenue so that there would be no deficits in the reserves until after 2026. Should that not be successful and the council choose not to apply ARPA funds or choose not to remove the dolphin cost, there's still enough surplus revenue so that the ferry system the reserve would not be depleted until 2025. And so what this tells us is this system has worked. When this system was created, the then director of Public Works looked at it and made a recommendation that fares should not be raised until there was a deficit for 3 to 5 years. And so you can, and that's taking the long view. That's looking, and if you look at it as Diane and I have from 06 through 2022, that has worked. There has been enough surplus to balance deficits. There's been enough reserves to deal with unexpected costs. And there's no emergency at this point to raise fares. There's time to continue this financial review and to make a reasoned approach towards any fare increase in the future, but there is no immediate need. Questions? We'll try to answer as best we can. And I did just want to point out that all this financial information came directly from Public Works. We did not make these numbers up.
Janice, it's all on the website.
Yeah. Yes, and it is on the website. So
Do you figure in any inflation in the projection?
The question is, do we figure any inflation in the projections? And what we have taken is the information from Public Works and what they have done for the years 2025 and 2026, which we show in our last chart, is it looks to me like it's about a 2.2%, which may be good or may not be good. We, and all of our analysis thus far, have not made up any numbers, so we're using what Public Works is doing.
Can you remind me when the last increase was?
well, the surcharge, oh, yeah, when was the last fare increase? And there was a temporary surcharge in 20.
The last fare increase was a giant $3 pedestrian, $3 vehicle, $3 truck, and it threw our fare structure completely out of whack with every other ferry structure. It actually, because of that $3 surcharge back in 2012, it actually means that it is cheaper for you to bring a car onto the ferry than to bring a friend onto the ferry. And so that was a very bad way to raise fares, but it made an awful lot of money. That's what created that surplus that we see. Then in 2021, the council, at the recommendation of the 2011 task force, that somewhere or other they had to begin accumulating funds for the capital side of things, which fares do not pay any capital costs. They enacted a $1 surcharge per trip that goes into a special separate fund, separate from the ferry system fund, and it's set aside for future capital, new ferry or infrastructure for the new ferry.
Ralph?
2021.
I think one of the slides indicated that 3 or 6 months reserve or was of the county fund. But Randy stood there on May 10th and said that 1587 is now $1 million, and in 2024
That has, yeah, the question was that the Randy Rydell from Public Works has indicated that the surplus, not the fare box surplus, but the road fund surplus is intended to go back to the general road fund and not continue to be maintained in the ferry system fund. That is a topic that the new LIFAC and the council will have to take up, because I think that would be a change in policy. For one, it seems to have been a policy to keep this for the last 17 years in the ferry system fund, just like we all keep reserves in our bank accounts for unanticipated expenses. And if that money is not in the ferry system fund, it doesn't, in my opinion, this is me talking, absolve the county from covering those unanticipated expenses. They would have to come up with the money from somewhere.
Can you tell us about your paper for the finance?
Charles wants me to tell you about our paper, which is available on the Our Lummi Island website under the work group page. And Diane mostly did the work on it. She is the numbers expert. And it is an exhaustive look at this 17-year history of how this came about and what the financial stability of the Ferry Fund is. And I recommend, and I can also email people a copy if they want a copy.
So you pulled the numbers from Public Works. Have they listened to then you giving them back their own numbers in the correct way?
So the question is, has Public Works looked at our version of their numbers? And yes, I did send it to them and I have not heard back. I have not heard that yes, we're right, and I have not heard no, we're wrong.
But we were, until just a few weeks ago, still making changes. So to give them a little grace, they haven't had it even a week yet.
Yeah.
So we'll give them a little more time before we pound on their door.
Dave?
So what is the relationship with the $1 surcharge that's for capital expenses? What is the relationship with that? If the fares are not supposed to be used for capital expenses?
So the question is, how are they doing a $1 surcharge for capital expenses when fares aren't supposed to go for capital? They changed the code.
I love democracy.
Yeah. One of the things about that is it is a separate line item in the code that they inserted in the code. They didn't change the structure where fares only pay for total operating expenses. They just inserted this extra item that we would also pay this. I will say that the 55% is equally a construct and could be changed. All of the ways that the fares are calculated could be changed. That's why, as boring as it may seem for us to be talking about code for months and months, it's that ferry rates code that will govern our rates in the future.
And one thing I think we should point out too, because this comes up often, the council or other people will throw back that Skagit pays 75% or Pierce County pays 80% of operating costs and we're only paying 55%. But as Diane has pointed out, and what I think is important to remember is what counts as operating costs. And each county defines it differently. And so I think in Skagit, they don't include parking and staging.
One of the interesting things is in 2022, Pierce County, who operates a ferry, was looking at it costing the county too much money. Does that sound familiar? Yes. So the county got concerned because they were paying too much. They hired consultants. The consultants did a really expensive, exhaustive study, including the Washington State ferry system, the 4 county ferries in Washington State, and ferries all over the East Coast, different kinds of ferries. And the consultant reports out that we pay the amount that we pay in fares is just slightly above. When a consultant works all the numbers from all these places, what we pay is just slightly above what Skagit County pays, and Pierce County pays even less because they put their county ferry under the transit system, so they get federal transit dollars.
I have a comment from okay, this is from Jed. This is from Jed online. For the record, the $1 capital surcharge was recommended by LIFAC.
Yes, that is correct.
And it was recommended first in 2011 by the 2011 Ferry Task Force that was the genesis of LIFAC. The report from 2011, you can find it in the library or online, went through a whole analysis of why it was so important for the county to start building up that capital fund.
Yeah, Charles?
Just let me add to that. Jed is right. This $1 surcharge was added in 2021.
2021.
Was deliberately
designed to pay for the next ferry, not the new one, but the one that we will have to buy in 2085.
Wow. Oh, yeah. So Charles's comment was a reinforcement that the $1 capital surcharge was promoted by LIFAC when it was presented to the council and was intended to not pay for this next ferry that we hope is coming in a couple of years, but for the one after that.
Taking a leap in the dark, it's not really what we thought. But we get a new ferry in 5 to 6 years. Hybrid ferry, it's new. It's not going to be breaking down. It's not going to occasion.
You are an optimist.
Yeah.
I'd like to be optimistic about the new ferry, but anyway, the operating costs, will they be significantly less?
So the question is whether the operating costs on the new ferry will be less, being as there should not be as many mechanical issues or dry docks. And that's just not something we can answer.
No.
Yeah, that's Public Works. And so that's something that's going to be a future topic.
I can make one quick comment on that because I spoke to the Skagit Ferry. Oh, sorry. I spoke to the Skagit Ferry system about that because they have a new ferry coming. And their consultants could not make a determination on that. And so they are not assuming significant savings in operating expenses at this time.
Okay.
So I think at this point, we'll move on to Peter, who is going to talk in a little more detail about the current code and the code changes and sort of where we're going to go from here.
Okay, I'm Peter. And so as Diane and Janice have so artfully documented, the existing code has served us very well for 17 years. Notwithstanding that fact, on July, and I'm going to repeat a few things here just to frame the situation. But as you know, on July 25th, the county council passed a new ordinance, an amended ordinance that will, if enacted, if it becomes law, it will dramatically change the law governing ferry operations, and most importantly, how our fare box determines the cost of our fares. Okay. Now, to be fair, the new ordinance that was vetoed contains some provisions which are actually pretty helpful. There were changes to the punch card sizes and a number of other things, right? So but those positive things pale in comparison or under the shade of the changes that we would face in our fare box with regards to operational maintenance and capital expenditures. We'll be talking about that. That ordinance passed on July 25 by a 5-2 vote. And despite the fact that LIFAC was never able to actually make a recommendation. As a matter of fact, I would go further to say, because I went to every single one of the meetings or participated online, that LIFAC never even discussed the merits of that ordinance, right? And the ordinance was postponed on various occasions in order to allow for input and for receipt of information and feedback from LIFAC, none of which happened. 731 of us on the island signed a petition asking that ordinance be held in abeyance in order to allow for this kind of a discussion to occur. Okay, that was delivered to the council. That Paul, the county executive, told the work group, told us that we didn't need to worry about this because he wanted to make sure that the ordinance was held in abeyance for these very purposes, to allow for that community input, to allow LIFAC to evaluate the situation. Todd Donovan, the liaison to LIFAC from the county council, told us in no uncertain terms, same thing, that they were going to hold off on the ordinance until the fall, after LIFAC was reconstituted and community input's been gathered, and then they would be looking at the ordinance. So on July 25th, everybody was sitting comfortably thinking that we were home free, and then this happened. Okay? Now, to his very, very great credit, Sat Paul vetoed that ordinance for those reasons, in order to allow for this community input to manifest itself through a newly constituted LIFAC. And so, look at my next page here. And in fact, what Sat Paul is saying is he wants to make sure that there's meaningful community input, and so that, and LIFAC will serve as the vehicle for that meaningful community input. This synopsis represents the very tortuous road that we have ridden on this summer as a community. And now we've come to this fork in the road, the veto. Okay? And 3 members of the county council have asked for there to be a vote, a special meeting to vote on overriding that veto. So that's the fork in the road. There's an override or a sustaining of the veto, or a ratification of the veto, or support for the veto. In other words, the veto would stand. So several people have asked, what happens under this scenario? If the veto is sustained, the ordinance that was passed is dead. It goes away. It doesn't exist. It has no force of law. And the existing ordinance that has served us so well for 17 years comes into force, and until changed, and if changed. Right? So, the council, 10 o'clock on September 5th, will decide which fork of the road they take. And since we don't have a functioning LIFAC, it is up to us, the island community, to make our views known, to go to the council meeting on the 5th, if you can, at 10 o'clock in the morning, to call council members before the meeting, to let them know what we think about these things. It's very, very important, because we have to fill a void as a community with LIFAC helping, what was the term we used? LIFAC being put on ice, I guess. What? Pause. A pause. LIFAC been paused. We do have 2 members of the current LIFAC here with us, Jim Dickinson and Rich Fry, who hopefully will be able to pick up their roles again very soon. All right, so we go to slide number 1 on my part of the presentation there. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. So this is.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure why.
There you go. That's it. That's it.
Nothing there.
There you go.
Don't move, don't move.
Okay. Oh, if I move, it changes?
No.
Okay. Okay. So the critical language, I mean, probably for us, the most important thing is the language, the definition of operating costs in this ordinance. Operating cost means all actual daily running expenses and all actual regular and routine maintenance and administrative expenses associated with the use and operation of all physical elements of the ferry system. The new version would change that language, completely rescind the regular and routine maintenance discussion, and simply say that total operating costs, all expenses that are not capital costs, are part of our fare box and go into the 55% thing, where we have to pay 55% of that. So this is a gigantic step backwards. The words regular, routine, maintenance, regular and routine limit the meaning of the word maintenance. It's a very basic concept of law that when you have adjectives in front of a term, the adjectives actually limit the general term. That's used in constitutional law, it's used in statutory law, it's used in ordinances, it's used in contracts between private parties. So this is, and the purpose, the public policy that exists behind those words is that operational maintenance ought to be stable and predictable. Right? And the reason it ought to be stable and predictable is that transportation, when you live on an island with a ferry, is an essential part of every single family's budget. You know, imagine if your electric bill, your propane bill, your garbage disposal bill had the kinds of variations that become potentially operative when you remove those limiting words, regular and routine. Did you change that on me? All right. All right. So what are the consequences of this change in the words? You can see here the red dotted lines. Yeah, I got to speak into the microphone. The red dotted lines. That represents what would happen immediately. That jump in cost. I got to credit Diane for this, the work here, because Diane went and took 12 years of bills that were paid, maintenance and repair bills by the county as part of this process for 12 years, and lined them all up and sorted them. And what she found was that there was only two bills, two expenses that were more than $55,000. There was the dolphins, right? And that's what accounts for this. You know, this makes the whole process incredibly unpredictable. And the 373,000 increase in we're going to have to pay for that. 350 if this stands. $373,000 would represent our 55% share of that, of including that in our fare box. So, you know, I think it was Raymond who talked about how important the transition period we're in is. You know, we're in a period with an aging vessel and an aging marine infrastructure, right? And a lot of things can happen. And the new ferry isn't going to be here for 4 or 5 years, I guess, is the estimate. So lots of things could go wrong. You could have problems with the engines in the new ferry. That could take that red dotted line even higher. We don't know. We'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But these dramatic increases, you have to ask the question, are they consistent with state law? Somebody asked, what does the law say about this? Okay. And there are actually two sources of state law here that are important. There is the interagency agreement between the county and the Washington Department of Transportation. That interagency agreement has a provision in it, it's in red there, paragraphs 1.3 and 1.4. It says that basically, and this is very consistent with the regular and routine language we have in our ordinance. It says that regular operating and maintenance expenditures are defined as, with regards to things like the dolphins, routine anticipated replacement of piling, wing wall facing, repairing docks, etc., which does not extend the useful life nor increase the efficiency or capacity of an asset. Okay? That would seemingly cover the dolphins. Yeah? And excluded from operating and maintenance expenditures are other work and repairs that are considered capital improvements. So now we go to capital improvements. Here we have the Washington Administrative Code in the WAC 136-400-030 is a state regulation that applies only to counties that operate ferries, and there are 4 counties. And it says, and it defines what ferry capital improvement projects are. It says, county ferry capital improvement projects shall include the following. And for our purposes, subparagraphs 2 and 3 are operative here. Major vessel refurbishment, i.e. engines, structural steel, and controls that substantially extends the life of the vessel. Okay? Paragraph sub 3, facility refurbishment, replacement. Example, complete replacement, comma, major rebuilding or redecking of a dock that substantially extends the life of the facility. And this concept of extending the life of an asset, the service life of an asset, is very important to understand. You know, the county is required to publish a 14-year capital plan. And in that plan, they have to list all the capital assets they have, the date that it was installed, the date that it is fully depreciated or amortized, and the date it is scheduled to be replaced, right? These items that caused that red dotted line to go up the way it did were installed in 1978. They were fully amortized. They were fully depreciated in 2018. They were scheduled for actual replacement in 2024, next year. They jumped the gun and did it this year. And instead of making it a capital expense, they made it an operational, or trying to make it an operational maintenance expense that we are going to pay the $373,000, out of our fares. So that's basically it in a nutshell, in terms of this thing. I mean, so what are the conclusions? My conclusions, and I think they're pretty solid conclusions legally, that the existing ordinance and the language regular and routine is very consistent and promotes the same public policies that the Washington Administrative Code does in its capital definition and the interagency agreement does in its maintenance definition. Am I out of time yet? Or a little more time?
One more slide.
One more slide. Yeah. Oh, I know. I know. But I just want to wrap up one more little quick point here. Our moderator warned me not to run over my time. So, I guess the takeaway is that there really are two major reasons why the county council should vote to sustain this veto. And the first is to make our ferry fares and the ordinance governing our ferry fares stable, predictable, and thereby protect our wallets on the island. And make it reasonable for people to continue to live here, allow us to have the diverse socioeconomic community we have without displacing people through gentrification by ordinance, which is something that could happen if this runs amok. And the second is to make the county ordinance, or keep the county ordinance, consistent with state law, which is an important value. Okay? Now, the last thing I want to talk about is that in 2020, we had COVID, and we lost a lot of ridership. They stopped taking tickets for a while. They posted a sign by the ferry that said only for, what was the essential travel only. They deterred revenue by a valid public health policy, in support of a valid public health policy. Okay. ARPA, the American Recovery Plan, Protection Act, is designed to assist communities to cope with this kind of an event. Okay. The county has used ARPA in all sorts of different kinds of things, for all sorts of different kinds of projects, many which have no relationship to COVID whatsoever. The single most blatant, uncovered, unaddressed COVID consequence that is the direct result of a public health policy adopted by the county is the loss of revenue. And so we need, it is only fair that be replaced, those $358,000 in lost revenue be replaced through ARPA, and that go into our fare box, because we are in this transition period. And it is really, really precarious for us. These next 3 to 4 years are going to be very, very difficult. And it's going to be very important that LIFAC be reestablished with vitality, with no more 3-minute rules, and meaningful participation by the community. So with that, I'll entertain any questions. No. So we'll start over here. Okay, go.
So how can the code actually be retrospective to the law? That's what, because the dolphins have been paid for, and so how can that work?
Retroactivity is actually something I've dealt with a lot. in my own.
Question, repeat the question.
Okay, what, why don't you read, say the question again?
How can the code be changed that it would actually apply new code to old purpose?
Yeah, how can a new code be retroactively applied to old events? Generally speaking, laws that are passed are prospective unless in the law it states that the legislative body intends it to be retroactive. Legislative bodies can apply laws retroactively, but there's a limitation on that. There's actually a state constitutional and a federal constitutional limitation on that. You cannot apply a law retroactively that negatively affects a vested interest or a vested right. Okay, and so I suppose an argument could be made that they couldn't retroactively impose a non-regular, non-routine expense on our pocketbooks, you know, because our rights have vested. I'm not suggesting that that is a viable argument. It's a plausible argument.
Actually say that. The code that's been vetoed, is it?
No, the code is silent on its retroactive application. So there's two schools of thought on that, because there is retroactivity that's explicitly stated, which is the preferred way to legislate, and then there's inferred retroactivity, inferred by the construction of the ordinance. And I would argue that there's nothing in the ordinance, the vetoed ordinance, that would imply an intent to retroactively apply it. Although I suspect that.
Question.
But yeah. David.
How many votes are needed to sustain the veto in the city council?
Three votes.
Repeat the question.
How many votes are required to sustain the veto at the council level? And the answer is 3 votes. Okay. No, yes.
Does the county or the council retain a lawyer?
Does the county retain a lawyer? Is that the question?
Yes. Are they taking any kind of legal advice on this?
They do have a legal relation, I guess a client relationship with the prosecutor's office. There's a civil attorney there who provides that kind of counsel to the.
They don't seem to have any standing in what they're doing.
Yeah, the comment is that they don't seem to have any standing in what they're doing. We don't know what kind of advice the prosecutor's office has given to the council, because that's privileged. Okay, when they get advice from council, they go into executive session to receive that advice. Right, and if they tell us what their advice was, they then are, I guess, are
question here.
They're breaching the privilege. Yeah. What's the? We have several hands raised. Rich and Diane, or
okay. Rich and Rob.
Rich and Rob.
Okay. So I just have a comment. You see the charts with the jumping graph.
This one.
Yeah. So another thing that's interesting about this graph is that.
Rich, would you like to go to the podium?
Yeah, why don't you come up here?
So we don't have to repeat this. Would you go up there?
Yeah, my RAM memory won't allow me to retain it all and repeat it.
So
no, here. You got to speak here.
Okay, I can see the chart. Okay. So if we look at the black line, which is repairs and maintenance expenses, what isn't clear unless you look at the actual numbers. I did a piece. I think I put out a paper sometime in the last few months, pointing this out, that for many years, the regular and ordinary maintenance was a relatively flat line that more or less followed the cost of living and the cost of there's a price index for marine repairs. The black line shows that the peaks started jumping up here after 2015, 2016, 2017, a big jump, 2018 less, 2019 not so much, and then back in 2020, and then 2021 and 2022 have gone bananas with the red lines. So I took the 10 most expensive repairs of that period and removed them. And if you remove them, basically what you find is that those peaks in 2016, 2017, going above the green line, are because those all start including capital and repair expenses that were over the $20,000, which had never been seen before. And there were 30, 35, 45, 55, 65 in those years. And then we had the jumps in the red thing. So the other message from this graph is that over the last several years, these kinds of maintenance expenses, which are basically repairing capital that hasn't been repaired for a long time, have been operative. And one of the directions of a possible reconciliation here is side note, every public works system on the planet over the next 20 or 30 years is going to be heavily stressed because of all of the damage that's happening from fires, from floods, from all kinds of the things that are happening, including Whatcom County. So there's a possibility that in this whole process that we're all engaged in, that, and I think Mike actually suggested this, that what if we set $100,000 limit on these operating expenses? We'll help to pay for them with fares. We'll do more than our fair share, but we need to start following the rules again. So kind of what all of this is boiling down to, this whole process that we're all engaged in, is now getting to a place where if we all pitch in as a community and we get the council to buy into it, I think from people I've talked with, we're okay to pay a bit more, but we need a limit on this. We can't have this kind of jumping around. And so there's room for a lot of public discussion about that, but that seems to be, Bob and I have talked about this, that seems to be the direction of some kind of compromise that we can keep the ferry running into the future and limit get these red lines out of here. Anyway,
so we have a question. That's some questions here. So we have a question online that from David Kirshner. The question is whether it would take 4 votes to override the veto. And the answer to that is no. It's 3 votes because it's an enhanced majority that's required. It's not a simple majority to override a veto. It's normally in any legislative process it takes something larger than the majority to override a veto. Yeah.
Well, I keep hearing a 5 to 2 votes, and I thought one of the council members didn't vote.
That was on the. Maybe I was wrong about that. No, that was the vote. You're right. You're right.
I will explain that to you, Steve, afterwards. It's a technical thing, but there was a prior vote to the final vote, and there was an abstention.
So who were the 2 that voted against it?
Against the ordinance, it was Buchanan and Todd Donovan. Okay, so we need to have one other council member join Buchanan and Donovan, assuming neither of them changed their votes. And so this is really, it's incumbent on us to call them and talk to them and make sense to them. And I would recommend, this is not the place where we really, at this point, fight the issues on the merits. We want to have this ordinance sustained. I mean, the veto sustained, and we want LIFAC reconstituted. And then we want all of these other issues we've been talking about here that are so important to be channeled through LIFAC in a meaningful way with community input so that the council can make appropriate decisions. at that point. If there ought to be some changes in the future to the ordinance, then that's what would have to happen that way. But that's, so I'm hesitant to recommend that we argue the case on, for example, regular and routine. I mean, that's controversial with public works. It's a controversial issue. But it's something that needs to be reasoned out. It needs to be explored. It needs to be evaluated. It needs to be studied. And LIFAC is the vehicle for that. And the council is well suited to listening to LIFAC make those presentations. So it's the democratic process that was not followed when that ordinance was adopted, voted on July 25th, that justifies the veto. It's, and that's what Sat Paul is operating as a steward of, our right to participate democratically in a legislative process that we were promised. It was taken away from us. Sat Paul vetoed it. That veto needs to be sustained.
That was an excellent summary of really the strategy and the movement forward. You heard a lot of technical discussion of issues. That's not where we are at this very moment. We hope to be positioned so that that kind of genuine conversation can occur. The next step is to review the whiteboard. I promise you'll be out of here in 5 minutes. Okay. So we just want to see, are we being true to ourselves as to the issues that we talked about? Please talk about affordability. I think we did. We talked about how to sustain a system that's consistent, predictable, and affordable. The 6-month break in ferry service, that issue is of great concern, but we're not here. We don't know enough about it. We really hope that there will be meetings, even maybe before LIFAC comes back into play, so that we learn what the ups and downs and possibilities are there. The definition of operating expense and capital, you've heard that discussed, and that issue sits right in front of us. The council, does the council have to consider restrictions when making decisions? Absolutely. They got to follow the law. And we're wondering if there's some opportunities here to in a more focused way, focus on that law or have it changed. And if there is a change, then we would like that to be a public policy discussion with community input. Confidence, I think confidence in our public works department and our council. I start with the point of view that everybody has good intentions. And we just need to get into a position where we can have a genuine, open, and direct conversation with these people. They're hardworking people, and I think we should give everybody the benefit of the doubt, and we hope that we'll get that benefit as well. There's a question here about why islanders and tourists pay the same amount. There is some consideration for having a summer rate, something like that. Another great issue to maybe talk about and study. What is it that keeps us, Lummi Island, from communicating? We talked about the structure. We'd like that structure to accommodate direct communications. We've already sent some material to Public Works. We don't want that to be a mail back kind of thing. We want to have a conversation about it, and we hope we'll be given that opportunity. How do we repopulate LIFAC? Charles spoke about that very eloquently. We heard about qualifications. The $52 million grant. We need to keep our eye on that, and we need to be developing a good, healthy relationship with our council and with our Public Works Department. And I think we have the intention to do that. We hope it'll be reciprocal. Capital expenses versus operating. We talked about those. Top issues and recommendations for the next version of the ferry ordinance. I don't think we really got to that tonight, but that is the agenda that we hope we'll be able to develop in conversation with Public Works and with the council. How to have a more transparent communication. We've talked about that. We realize that it hasn't been to anybody's liking. Let's move up again a little farther, please. Capital and operating. Does the Lummi Nation have a say in any of this? Actually, the Lummi Nation holds the lease to the ferry dock on Gooseberry Point, so obviously they have a stake in it. But with regard to the policies that we're talking about here, the Lummi Nation really is not involved in that discussion. Now, there may be further consideration as if they're looking at repopulating LIFAC to have some representation there, but at this point, they are not decision makers in this ordinance. What can islanders do to get our ideas and information across to the county as they decide whether to support the veto? You heard from Peter. Pay attention. 10 o'clock, September 5th. I really believe that our county executive would like to see as much articulated input from our county, from our Lummi Island members in person, at the council chambers, or online. It will be a hybrid meeting. I think we should be as voluminous as we can to show that this is our interest. Let's jam the online connection with 50, 75, 100 of us, and let's have people in the room. And this is not to be angry. This is to just, please, listen to us. We've been asking for this opportunity, and it didn't happen. Please now, give us that, stay true to yourself, and let us rebuild trust together. The relationship between the 2 million surplus and the expenses that are coming up, you heard that explained. Explore broader ideas to operate the ferry. Jim mentioned that. I think there are probably going to be lots of ideas going forward.
I'd like to make one person, well, not person, but just something you need to think about. Right now, 45% of the budget of Lummi Island Ferry comes out of the Earle County. The trade of Lummi Island mostly goes to Bellingham, to touch the firm. They don't pay one nickel in the service. And I think that that is not fair.
Now, Jim, I think it's an interesting policy question. Very interesting policy question. Pam mentioned that early on. And the final point here is, what is the status of the new ferry ordinance? We've talked about that. So those are the issues that we said we wanted to cover, that you said you wanted to cover. I think in fairness to all of us, we did a pretty good job of that. Would you take this down now, please? And so we're going to, once again, mark your calendar, September 5th, 10 a.m. Between now and then, if you go to our web section of the website, you can find contact information for each of the council members. And I urge you to pen a note to them, make a call to them. I think it will be very important between now and then for your voice to be heard through that mechanism, as well as on that day. So I'm going to close now before Mary does a final LICA closing. And I just want to say that, to me, this was a very invigorating evening. I really felt like we were together. We were a community tonight. We listened to you. I think we listened to each other. And I really appreciate that. I want to particularly acknowledge the panelists who put all of this information together. Pam, Peter, Janice, Charles, and Diane. Would you please give them... And there are other working members here. Kathy Shornick is here.
You can't leave our moderator out.
Well, and I talked to Steve Thomas earlier. Did I miss anybody? And Rama has been with us through a lot of this. Thank you, Rama, for your wisdom throughout this. Finally, I want to thank our technology team. Is this cool? So when they say at a concert, I want to thank the band, okay? Okay, on keyboards and camera, Leslie, Dempsey, and Paul. Thank you. And on whiteboard, Dan Deshpande. And on Zoom link, Alan Krum. Okay, let's hear it. Thank you all, and I want to turn it over to. You have something else to say? Oh, it's my wife. What do I do? I'm stuck. I got to go home with her.
In addition to saying, do this, get there next Tuesday morning. Like, everybody think about going and talking to 5 friends that you have on Long Island and telling them they have the opportunity to go to this, and if the council sees that there's 900 people, that have figured come there or are reached out, yeah, we have, you know, are on the Zoom link, then we can stand there and say, yeah. Yeah. So if we are all given the instruction to go out on the and maybe we're. Anyway.
Okay, thank you. I want to also thank the people who have been with us online. I hope that we've done justice to your input. Our team has really been trying to do that. So thank you all for being here in that way. I'm going to turn it back to Mary. Okay, Mary Ross, finish it up. Mary, thank you for everything you've done to get us here.
And I just want to say that LICA will continue to have town hall meetings like this as we go forward with this effort. This is one of the things that LICA has done in the past, and we will continue to do to support the community in having those conversations that can't take place in 3 minutes. Okay, so when LIFAC comes back online, we will be there to support their work and to give them opportunities to do outreaches like this, so that hopefully we won't get to the place that we are again. And
I
so
just want, oh, I don't know why it won't. There was information on the final screen. We can't seem to bring it up, but the information is the website where you can get all that information.
Yeah, it's just go to LICA, OurLummyIsland.org. Okay, and thank you all for being here, and thank you Zoom people for participating, and let's go out and hopefully this has been meaningful. Okay, yeah, and just a second.
Will be on the website.
This recording will be on the homepage tomorrow morning of LummyIsland.org. We'll put them away.